Hi, everybody, and welcome to Valley Happenings. I'm Susie Wiley, and thanks for tuning in. And hello to all of you across the state of Alabama. And thanks for watching. I just thank you so much for the emails and all of the things that are going on across this wonderful state. And also for all of you who are calling and giving suggestions for shows. And we're just meeting so many wonderful people. Okay, well, we're gonna cross the border here today. We're gonna have a guest on from Tennessee, but we love all our friends in Tennessee. Okay, but again, through the internet and connections that I've made throughout this country, which is just absolutely wonderful, we have a wonderful guest with us today. And you know, I love book authors. I've been doing this for 11 years, interviewing book authors across the country. Okay, and even all of you who've been with me for a long, long time, I interviewed the one gentleman who wrote that wonderful, wonderful book. It's laying on my desk, and the title just went off of my brain. But anyhow, I interviewed him from Israel that day, remember? But today we have Sheryl Griffin with us. And Sheryl is the author of a book called The Scarlet Cord of Hope, okay? And it is her true story, and we're going to share it with you. So, Sheryl, I want to welcome you.
Well, thank you.
From
Franklin, Tennessee.
Okay.
We crossed the border.
And Derek's all excited because he has two Tennesseans here today. Okay, we're almost outnumbered with Tennesseans in the building, and your husband is here with us,
Yes.
Doug. Okay, now, and all of you, this is Cheryl's life. Mm-hmm. Okay, and first of all, I think what we're going to start with before we get into the meat of the story and the guilt and the shame and the fear that you had, that you overcame and finally saw the light.
Yes.
Okay, the title.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the title, A Scarlet Cord of Hope. When we think of scarlet, we think of the scarlet letter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, am I close?
Yes, definitely. Scarlet Cord of Hope came out of feeling like for a lot of my life I had the scarlet letter on my chest. I was a marked person, a marked woman with all of my guilt, shame, and fear issues. And so a scarlet cord of hope helped me to realize there is hope. None of us are perfect. We all have scarlet letters in our life, in our past, but there is hope.
There's hope. And you finally realized that, but it took you a while.
It took me a long time.
All right, now Sheryl is going to tell her story with us today, and it's a very emotional story, but it's happening, and it's happening across our nation, across our world, as we are sitting here talking. Is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that is being in an abusive relationship. And, you know, when we think of abuse, you know, we think, oh, somebody is just, you know, having to go to the hospital because maybe they're abused, so in physically abused. But there's all kinds of abuse, isn't there?
There is. There's emotional abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse.
And which abuse did you have?
I had them all.
And is it wonderful that you can laugh now?
Yes.
And okay, you're not laughing at it.
No.
It's a healthy laugh.
It is a sign of my healing and that I can actually talk about it, and now I can hopefully share my story with others so that they can have the same freedom and hope.
Okay, now tell everybody, how does this all start? And we hear about cycles that can't be broken. Okay, so tell your story.
Yeah, well, my story does start with cycles. My parents, when they married, they weren't expecting to get married. They'd only been dating a few short weeks, and then my mom became pregnant with me. Their marriage started off on a very rocky road, and my parents are both alcoholics. My father is now passed away, but my mother is still living and still in denial and chooses to self-medicate with alcohol. And
that's her medication.
That's her, yeah. That's what she chooses, is instead of facing her issues. She had a very traumatic life and a lot of trauma and abuse in her life as a child, but instead of facing it, which is really hard. It is very hard to finally pull, as I say in my book, pull everything out from the rug, face it head on, acknowledge what you need to acknowledge, and then try to move on. But for a lot of people, especially like people like my mother, it's easier, and my father, it's easier just to keep drinking because it numbs you, but it doesn't solve anything.
Right.
You sober up and the problems are still there. The issues, the pain, the guilt, the shame, it's all still there.
Okay, now, you know, we talk about abuse. If you grow up in an abusive family and you know no different, you may think that's life.
Right, but that's the key with me is I did not grow up in an abusive home. My parents were alcoholics. There was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of chaos in my life as a child, but we were not abused. I was not abused as a child, and so that's how the book came about, because I had asked my doctor, okay, I get all these little pieces, but how come I married a man that I knew in high school, that I knew had abusive tendencies, I knew ex-girlfriends in his class, he abused me before we married, why did he have to leave me after 9 years? Why did I stay? Why did I think it was okay? And she kept saying, Sheryl, you were primed. You were primed for this relationship. It's not to blame my family, my parents, or anybody else, but it just shows the power of parents that we have to set the stage for our children. And it's, again, it's not blaming my parents. I made choices. I knew.
Okay, all right. Now, you know, in this, you know, loving, and your parents get divorced.
Right.
And your parents get divorced, but you go with your father.
Right.
Which at that time, that's very,
It
children didn't
happen.
go with fathers. They, no matter what the mother was, the child went
right.
with the mother.
Right.
But your mother elected to not fight this?
She tried. Her story has been that my father tricked her into signing custody papers. This was, to date myself, this was back in the 70s, early 70s, and it was unheard of for fathers to gain custody of their children. My mother, though, she also, she's not diagnosed, but I do believe very strongly that she has mental illness. There's patterns in her entire life, but that's another book.
But your father never abused you?
No. He was an alcoholic. There was not
anger?
No, not towards me. Now later on, I have some younger siblings, and they've got other issues, but there's 7, 10, and 11 years difference between me and them. So they have a different story. They know a different dad than I knew. But my father, it was more distant. There wasn't a connection there. There wasn't something that my husband does now, my wonderful husband. I have a daughter who's almost 22, and we married when she was 7, and you know, he would take her on dates and spend one-on-one time with her, connect with her. My dad, I know he loved me, but that there wasn't a connection there.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, we're going to continue with Sheryl, but we have some satellite interviews today that I think are very interesting, and we selected for you. So we're going to take that break, and we'll be right back.